Today I want to dive into some insanely cool composition secrets behind one of the most iconic video game soundtracks of all time, the Path of Pain theme from Hollow Knight. The reason I'm so obsessed with discussing the specific track is simple. It is the ultimate gateway song to introduce people to classical music without them even realizing it. Trying to connect with newer generations can be tough at times if you don't speak the same language or bring the same references to the table, you know? And hey, I totally get it. When I was 12 years old, classical music was the absolute last thing on my radar, but then it clicked for me and I felt so hard for it that now I just want to share it with everyone and show you exactly what you've been missing out on. So, without further ado, let's dive in. Hollow Knight is wild because it's this multi-generational masterpiece that unites everyone, from young teens to players in their 40s and 50s. People will argue all day long about the gameplay being too difficult or the lore being too convoluted, but pretty much everyone agrees that the music absolutely bangs. Christopher Larkin did for video games what John Williams did for film music. Think about it. If you knew nothing about classical music back then, your closest touchstones were probably Star Wars, Harry Potter, and of course some classic Disney. This specific piece, which echoes constantly through the Path of Pain, is so well written that when I first played through it, I literally paused the game to Google the composer, and I even opened a LinkedIn account just to track this guy down and send him a message like, man, this thing is brilliant. And of course I never got a reply, but in that moment I felt like my passions for both games, movies, classical music all collided into one single mind-blowing event. So what actually makes the Path of Pain music so special? Well, we could go on and dissect melody, harmony, rhythm, orchestration, but we'll have to start with the form. The historical blueprint behind this song is arguably its coolest feature. If you haven't been anywhere near a music classroom, you might have stumbled across the word sarabande. Think of a sarabande like a template from the Baroque era. We're talking about 1600s, 1700s, sort of like blues form, the waltz, the pop ballad, right? Back then, if you wanted to hear music, you couldn't just, open Spotify, you had to attend live music concert. Seems crazy, I know. And because of this, composers were essentially hired to constantly pumping out fresh music for all kinds of social occasions, especially for church and nobility, and a lot of dance parties. A ton of those old dance styles are completely forgotten today. Things like the courant, the allemande, le gigue. I'm sorry, but put yourself in the composer's shoes back then. What you're trying to do is basically to build a set list, pretty much like a DJ will do today. They will collect these different dances and bundle them into a unified set list called a suite. A suite was a collection of dances arranged in a traditional order, all sharing the same key center, like keeping everything in C major or F minor and so on. And now you might ask, what has this whole thing to do with Hollow Knight, right? Well, give me one more minute and you'll find out. One of the heavy hitters of the era was the sarabande. If you listen to classical examples like the Handel legendary Sarabande in D minor, which you might recognize from movies like Barry Lyndon by Stanley Kubrick, no? Nothing? Okay, it hits you with a very distinct mood. So let's see the main two features of the sarabande. Number one, it is slow, it is noble, it is solemn, it is in 3, usually in 3-2 or 3-4. And number two, it features a heavy stress on the second beat. What does that even mean? Well, think about a waltz with a classic 1-2-3, 1-2-3. They punch the first beat, which drives the music and the rhythm forward and makes the music feel more fluid. The sarabande does the exact opposite. By shifting the accent to the second beat, right in the middle of the bar, it drags the energy back. It's like pausing for emphasis in the middle of a sentence every time you speak, making the music feel wide, important, and serious. And there's actually a fun story about it. Despite what you might think, Sarabande isn't actually a European dance at all. It probably originated in Mexico in the 1500s, and originally it was fast-paced, it was lively, and they said wildly sensual. It blew up across Europe, of course, but since it was clearly not aligning with Christian values, of course, it was suppressed during the Spanish Inquisition. Of course. But here's the twist. Since it was so popular, the attempt didn't really work out, and instead, with time, it just got stripped away of all the sensual and quote-unquote vulgar components. So, just like that, they rebranded it into the rigid, noble court dance that we know today. And honestly, this friction reminds me a lot of why it works so well in Hollow Knight. You have this brutal, frantic gameplay in the Path of Pain clashing beautifully with this ultra-solemn, restrained dignity of the background track. Rhythmically, as we said, the track relies on the classic Sarabande framework: steady chords on beats 1 and 2, heavy accent on beat 2, and a quick upbeat at the end of the bar to pull you into the next measure. Larkin purposely builds this soundtrack using leitmotifs, which are recurring musical themes, to make the game's entire universe feel interconnected and operatic. The term leitmotif was firstly used by Richard Wagner, and I just want to quickly remind you that the Wagner's masterpiece The Ring of the Nibelung is a 15 hours long opera. 15. It's basically the opera version of the Lord of the Rings extended cut. But anyways, this specific piece is set in the key of E minor, which means we have just one sharp, F sharp. The genius here is that the music feels like it's constantly climbing, and that is driven entirely by the bass line. The bass line plays an ascending scale that hovers around G for the first 4 bars, steps up to A, drops down to F sharp, and then back to G, and then starts a massive climb to A, B, C, D, D sharp, E, and finally F sharp before restarting the loop. Because Larkin seamlessly masks the transition points, your brain doesn't actually register when the loop resets. It creates an illusion known to music theorists as a Shepard scale, the musical equivalent of a barber's pole that looks like it's rising forever. Now, technically, it's not a strict Shepard scale, but the compositional trick is identical, and it fits the gameplay perfectly, right? You're literally suffering through a vertical, twisted obstacle course. This endless musical ascent acts as a direct metaphor for a looming revelation. It's the exact moment the story forces you to realize who the Hollow Knight really is. Larkin is also a massive fan of pedal points. You can hear them everywhere, from the City of Tears to Bywater in Silk Song. I recently made a full video about that, go check it out if you haven't already. Anyways, a pedal point is just a single note that stays glued in place while the chords shift around it, keeping everything grounded. On top of that, he taps into an old Baroque trick called suspension or retardation. The concept is simple. You take a note from the previous chord and deliberately stretch it into the next one. This creates a harsh dissonance. This constant push and pull is the backbone of classical music. You can go as far as saying that the whole classical music production can be summed up in the contrast between tension and resolution. It's theatrical contrast, like between light and dark or good and evil, which makes total sense because classical music basically evolved straight out of theater and vocal music. But it gets even deeper here with some crazy symbolism going on. Look at the melody here. The main motif goes... The 8 notes here mimic the classic Mannheim sigh idea, a clever musical figure of speech where putting more weight on the first of 2 notes in pair of slurred note expresses the idea of sighing. In this specific case, actually, since the 2 notes are an interval of a minor second, they resemble a special Mannheim sigh figure called pianto, which is Italian for cry. Then look at the bass line. At the beginning, before the rise, it moves in a cross movement, or cruciform. It moves up by step, skips below, and returns to the initial pitch, drawing an imaginary cross. It's a technique usually associated with religious themes in Christianity, from Bach to Mozart. There's so much to unpack here that I think I won't be able to do that in one video, so I decided to go for a rapid fire analysis instead, so that you get at least an idea of what's going on. Ready? 3, 2, 1. We don't even start on a standard E minor chord. It kicks off in first inversion, meaning the third of the chord is in the bass. As the bass climbs and the upper voices hold still, it creates a sus2 chord, then morphing into a B sus4 in second inversion in the next bar. Then, after the ascent starts, a plot twist, a deceptive cadence. Normally, your ears expect a dominant chord to resolve cleanly back to the home key. A deceptive cadence totally betrays that expectation by veering off somewhere else, specifically to the 6th degree. The reason is because the leading tone, which provides the most tension in the dominant chord, resolves as usual going up, but the underlying harmony isn't the same. So it's like it finds some peace, but not exactly the way you thought. So, as we said, instead of resolving to E minor, the music pivots to a C major chord, the 6th degree. As we progress, we meet a minor 5th chord, which loses his dominant function. It acts like a connecting chord. I know you're probably seeing the 5th degree always with a raised third, the leading tone, and it makes total sense, but there are plenty of examples, even in Baroque music, where this doesn't happen. Check out, for example, the typical figuration of the lament bass, a descending progression used for centuries to convey, yet again, sorrow, love, pain, desperation, even anger. After raising the 5th to an actual dominant 5th degree by raising the 3rd in the bass, we get to yet another deceptive cadence to C major, but this time in first inversion. And then we get to the final dominant B chord in second inversion, which finally closes the loop. I know it's a lot. Please comment down below if you have any question or want to contribute to the thread. I would love to hear your thoughts. Now, if you have survived to this point, first of all, congratulations, I'm really happy. And second, there are a couple more things that I want to mention here, specifically about orchestration. Structure-wise, the track is built entirely on loops. The first time around, it sounds like an intimate string quartet, and on the second loop, boom, counter melody slides in. Now look at this 1, 2, 3 walking pattern. It's an old school staple of processional music. You can hear it doing the heavy lifting in the bass line of Pergolesi's Stabat Mater. I promised I would have mentioned this masterpiece again, it's so good, please do yourself a favor and go check it out. As the loops keep repeating, the core harmony and melody stay exactly the same. So how does it get more intense? Well, the answer is orchestrated crescendo. Larkin adds layers. A full choir joins the mix, strings double up, double basses anchor the low end. The music isn't just getting louder because you're telling the musicians to play louder, it's physically expanding its range. The most famous historical example of this is probably Maurice Ravel's Bolero. Ravel just stacks new instruments and combinations with every single loop, making the track sound bigger and bigger without ever changing the core melody. And fun fact, despite Bolero being what we would call today a global hit, Ravel actually thought it was one of the worst things he ever wrote. But you know, the technique works well, and Path of Pain uses that exact loop-based idea to build its intensity. The music in The Path of Pain is a storytelling masterclass because it aligns perfectly with the lore while completely contradicting the stressful and chaotic gameplay. This music isn't just there as a coping mechanism to keep you calm while you die to the same basso for the 50th time. It serves a massive narrative purpose. It completely hijacks your attention. While your hands are frantically trying to survive the spikes, the story is moving forward without you. It feels like the grand tragedy of the lore is unfolding right before your eyes, while the gameplay is just the thing keeping you trapped in place. It's a brilliant flip in perspective. The gameplay fades into background commentary and the music steps up as the main narrator. That exact parallel misalignment where the story travels on one track driven by the music and the gameplay travels on another driven by you, is exactly why the Path of Pain is so iconic. It is designed to unconventionally guide you into one of the most emotional revelations in the entire Hollow Knight saga. And that's a wrap. Man, I'm so glad we made it through that. It was a wild and dense run, a little bit like the Path of Pain itself, I guess, but hopefully you had some fun in the meantime. If you like this, please hit the subscribe button here on YouTube and come find me over on Instagram, where I'm dropping transcription breakdowns and running Q&As. And right here on YouTube, I got plenty more long-form essays and deep dive analysis coming your way. So let me know what you think, drop any questions, add your own theories, do whatever it takes to help the algorithm know that you want more of these videos. And with that being said, have a nice day. I'll catch up later.